Okay, I am standing here in Ziegler's Grove in front of the 126th New York Infantry Monument, and today's video is going to be Secrets of the Battlefield. And what we're going to talk about is a marker that's on the ground near this monument. Now, when many people come to this area, or have in the past, and of course today there is no more Cyclorama Center, which used to sit right here, but in the past it was one of the main parts of the Visitor Center complex. And of course during the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863, this was Ziegler's Grove. There was a grove of trees here, which they're going to replant again. In the year 1893, the chief engineer, Colonel E.B. Cope, came to Gettysburg, and his job was to establish a meridian line for surveying the Gettysburg battlefield, which at that time was under the Gettysburg Memorial Battlefield Association and not the National Park Service. He was to establish a meridian line for surveying the battlefield so that maps could be created where they could show where different regiments fought. And this little marker here that sits just near the monument right here is one of the original meridian markers that were put here by Colonel E.B. Hope. It was also E.B. Hope 2 years later that would be the designer of 5 metal observation towers that once sat on the Gettysburg battlefield, 3 which still exist today, and that would be the Oak Ridge, the Longstreet, and the Culp's Hill Tower, which we all did videos on. There were 2 more towers. One was on East Cemetery Hill, and the other one was on Big Round Top, which we also did a Secrets of the Battlefield video tour of Little Round Top and showed you where that tower once stood. So this is the Cope Meridian marker here next to the 126th New York Infantry Monument on Secrets of the Battlefield on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. Hey, I'm here on Stevens Knoll here, and I'm at the battery of the Stevens Battery Monument, and one of the questions I get asked the most is who sustained the most wounds at the Battle of Gettysburg. And the answer to that question was a man named John F. Chase, who is a cannoneer in Stevens Battery under the command of Greenleaf T. Stevens. Here at the Battle of Gettysburg, not only did he receive the most wounds at the Battle of Gettysburg, but he received the most wounds in any one battle in the Civil War. He was wounded 48 times here at the Battle of Gettysburg, standing here in this position, and actually more specifically nearby where this boulder is on the ground. Thus the reason it's marked by a flag. This is actually named the Chase Rock, and it's going to be part of our Secrets of the Battlefield series. And John F. Chase was wounded 48 times at the Battle of Gettysburg. It cost him his left eye and his right arm. He also would be later awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his actions at Chancellorsville, but he was wounded here 48 times. Of course, being hit that many times, there is very, very, very slight chance of survival. And actually, men found him laying here and brought him over to a dead cart. And placed him on the dead cart, and it wasn't until he was on the dead cart that someone realized that he was alive. And of course he survived the war and would later come back to Gettysburg and get his picture taken here next to this rock. So this has been Secrets of the Battlefield, the John F. Chase Rock on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. Okay, we're standing here on Buford Avenue, just a bit away from the Eternal Light Peace Memorial out here on Oak Ridge. And I want to talk about one of the little-known secrets of the Gettysburg battlefield. Back in the 40s, 1940s, there was a plan to build a inn, and actually it was a soda house, right here where we're looking at now, where this grove of trees is planted. And that became the Peace Light Inn. And the Peace Light Inn had cabins where people could come and stay here in the cabins. and do some recreational items. It was a very popular hangout for kids. And then, of course, in 1976, the National Park Service bought the Peace Light Inn for $630,000 from the Warner family who owned it. And 3 years later, on March 16th, 1979, the Warners woke from their second floor of the Peace Light Inn to smoke, and before long the entire structure was engulfed in flames and caught on fire and burned to the ground completely. Some firemen were badly injured and need to be rescued. This was actually another project like the National Tower and some of the cycloramas and visitor center that was controversial because, of course, it was built on the Gettysburg battlefield. And it was an early effort by the National Park Service not to have such structures on the battlefield. Therefore, after it did burn in 1979, it was never built back, and there wasn't any push to build it back or build any type of structure back here. But again, this was the site here where we're walking of the original Peace Light Inn and Cabins, which sat here on this site from the late 40s until March 16th, 1979. Okay, we are standing here at the wounding spot of General Paul Jones Sims. He was born on June 4th, 1815. Now, on July 2nd, 1863, he was leading his brigade, which consisted of the 10th, 50th, 51st, and 53rd Georgia, right here in this west area of the wheat field, when he was struck in the thigh and mortally wounded. Now, during the Civil War, General Sims carried a tourniquet with him. He self-applied that tourniquet so that he would not bleed to death here on the field. Now, a couple men from his brigade found him laying on the ground. And just recently, just before that, a U.S. flag had been captured. They used the U.S. flag to make a litter. And that's what they carried him from the field to an ambulance. Now, that ambulance was taken from here down to Martinsburg, Virginia. And of course, Martinsburg, you may think, is West Virginia, but in the year of 1863, West Virginia was not a state, and Martinsburg was in the state of Virginia. He was taken down to Martinsburg, Virginia, and there he lingered on for 8 more days. Now, on the 9th, on July the 9th, he wrote his wife a letter stating that, he thought he was going to survive his wounds. Little did he know the next day he would pass away. Now, on July the 10th, just a few minutes before he passed away, he was with a news correspondent, and some of his last words were, "I do consider it a privilege to die for my country." And of course, his country being the Confederate States of America. He was from Georgia originally. He is buried in Columbia, Georgia today. Now, this spot where he was mortally wounded right here is just west of the wheat field, and it's right where Dieterbrand Avenue begins. So if you come around the Rose Farm, which is right there in the distance, up the road here, when you get to Dieterbrand Avenue, you'll see these 2 boulders sitting right here, and that is the mortally wounding spot of General Paul Jones Sims, who died on July the 10th, 1863 in Martinsburg, Virginia. A man that was behind him in the fight, Captain George Hiller of the 9th Georgia Infantry, was an eyewitness to this spot where he was mortally wounded. So these 2 rocks right here, these 2 boulders where he was struck down, were popularized by an early park guide from the 60s and 70s, who was actually a neighbor of mine. His name was Colonel Jacob Sheeds. He lived on North Stratton Street, where I live. And Colonel Sheeds always called these the Semmes boulders, so they are regarded today by historians, battlefield guides, National Park Service as the Semmes boulders, marking the spot where General Paul Jones Semmes was mortally wounded. So this has been the story on General Paul Jones Semmes and the Semmes wounding spot, the Semmes boulders, on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. Okay, I am standing here in front of the marker for the Army of Northern Virginia Hills Corps Heath Division Archers Brigade. The 5th Battalion, 13th Alabama, 1st, 7th, and 14th Tennessee Infantry. And today's video is going to be about some earthworks, the remaining earthworks from this particular brigade. Are a little hard to see, but the remnants of them are basically where this line of trees sits here. And if you look at the ground, it slopes upward. And as we move over here, this little slope that these trees sit on right here and go up like this is the remaining earthworks of that particular brigade from July 1st, 1863. As Archer's Brigade made their way from the first day's battle over near the Herbst Woods into this area here. And again, this particular brigade is also probably the brigade that was responsible for firing the fatal shot that killed John F. Reynolds. And you can go back on our video series, Forward, for God's Sake, Forward, John F. Reynolds at Gettysburg. After that first day's action, that particular brigade moved into this area where they began building fortifications and earthworks for the second and third day here at Gettysburg. And this is the remnants of those Confederate earthworks here along West Confederate Avenue on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. Okay, I am standing here in front of the 20th Indiana Monument, and we're kind of in an area that's in the middle of a lot of different areas. Over here, we have the loop area. In this direction behind this set of trees is the wheat field. I just did a video on the 5th New Hampshire Colonel Cross Rock, so I'll actually post this video afterwards so you kind of have a point of reference where you're at. And then of course in here is Big and Little Round Top here. Devil's Den would be here, and then the triangular field in this distance. So as you come up from the top of Devil's Den, Sharpshooter's Pen, you make your way out to this road here, you come to this intersection and make a left, and here stands the 20th Indiana. The 20th Indiana was in the middle of the protection of this area here on July 2nd, 1863 in Longstreet's assault. And they were commanded by a man named Colonel John Wheeler, who was killed nearby. Now, when you go to the 20th Indiana Monument, and this is a video, not necessarily on the monument, but rock, secret of the battlefield. When you go to this monument, it's very basic and very simple. 20th Indiana, 20th Regiment, has the Corps insignia on the monument. And you have to excuse me again, I don't have no notes. I'm kind of going noteless today. 20th Regiment Indiana Volunteers, July 2nd, 1863, Colonel John Wheeler killed nearby. And that is it. If you go around the rest of this monument, there's nothing. The only thing that shows out on this monument is the maker's mark on the side, but everything else is blank. So basically it says 20th Indiana, has the Corps insignia, and then it says Colonel Wheeler killed nearby. Nearby is actually a location that is known by some, not by many, and that would be this rock here behind it. This is what we've nicknamed the Wheeler Rock, because this is the rock where Colonel Wheeler was thought to have been killed here on July 2nd, 1863, not far from where his monument today stands. So if you come to the Gettysburg Battlefield and you want to do something really neat, you can put a little American flag or Indiana state flag here near this rock. And again, I'll take a video positioning from the Wheeler Rock, which we're standing on right here, we're standing next to, and the 20th Indiana Monument just across the road. This has been the Wheeler Rock on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. Okay, we're standing here on the heights overlooking in front of us the triangular field and beyond Devil's Den and Little Round Top. And one thing I want to talk about today is in this area right here, which at the time of the battle was the Timbers Farm. Today, the only thing that remains of the Timbers Farm is some foundation. Um, the farm was actually owned by George Weichert, who was out fighting in Cole's cavalry during the time of the battle. And the house and barn was rented to a black man named John Timbers. Now, the house was just south of Rose Run, along the woods line there. It had a barn, and on July 2nd, the farm was in the midst of Longstreet's attack of Devil's Den and Little Round Top. All that remains, like I said, of the house is a foundation. Now, two brigades of Confederate infantry passed by the house here from Hood's division coming from that direction there. And as they approached this area here, they passed by the Timbers Farm, and early on the attack it was used as cover for the fight that would go on to Devil's Den and Little Round Top. After, of course, the Confederates passed there, the home was used as a field hospital where wounded soldiers lied in the dirt floor of the barn. Now, one thing that is a fact is that John Timbers, this African-American man, died in 1868. He was found hanging. What is folklore, is not known, is that one may have hung himself, and the local legend is that he hung himself because he was haunted by the spirits of the men who fought and died on these fields where he lived on July 2nd, 1863. A second piece of folklore that's never been proven is that he may have been a victim of a lynching. Whether that be true or not, Confederate troops lynched him because he was a free black, or whether he hung himself because he was haunted by the spirits of the men who fought and died here on July 2nd, 1863, has never been proven one way or other. But the fact is that he did die of a hanging just a few years after the battle. Again, this is the site of the Timbers Farm that sat here in front of us, just behind the triangular field area, and then, of course, behind that, Devil's Den and Little Round Top. And the fighting that took place here on Longstreet's assault on July 2nd, where two brigades passed by this farm on their way to Little Round Top. This has been the John Timbers Farm on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook.